Prepare the shields because I think I'm about to be flamed. Hello everyone, welcome back to SHOCKMANIA. I am the Arty Dance. Now, I already looked at movies that I loved that you hated. So I thought it might only be fair that I look at movies that you loved that I utterly loathed. Now, this video contains movies that are a combination of both critic darlings and fan favorites. So I think there are a few titles on this list that are overwhelmingly loved by critics that most horror fans just couldn't give a shit about. So I know I'm not in the minority on some of the movies on this list. And don't forget, it's not specifically you I'm talking about. I don't mean that you love all these movies. I just mean more like the general you. Now, before we go on, I just want to say this video is sponsored by me, specifically my Substack website. This video is in article form, complete on my Substack, and you can have a look at the link below. That article contains all the reference material that I used for this video, including the links to the movies and their scores, and of course the links to the quotes that I've used. Now, back to the video. The scores I've used in this video are aggregated from the following websites: Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Metacritic, TMDB, and the Chinese movie portal website Douban, as well as horror movie forum Reddit, where the best of the best opinions can always be found. Now, let's get this disaster started. So while IMDb, TMDB, and Douban paint a more accurate, if still overinflated, score for this film, it's the ridiculously high Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic score that has me wondering, did I watch the right film? I suppose this movie, on the surface, has everything: a hot director, diverse cast, and topical social commentary about class and privilege. But boy oh boy, is this a boring film. But I do have an issue with how people overreact to a piece of work that would otherwise be considered mediocre if directed by a majority of others. I want to bring your attention to this 4-star review from RogerEbert.com. Now, 4 stars is the maximum a movie can earn on that website. Now, if the great man was still alive today, he would absolutely roll in his grave because, quite frankly, he didn't like horror movies. But anyway, check this one out.
Like The Shining, there are a number of different ways to interpret Jordan Peele's excellent new horror movie, Us. Every image seems to be a clue for what's about to happen or a stand-in for something outside the main story of a family in danger. Peele's film, which he directed, wrote, and produced, will likely reward audiences on multiple viewings, each visit revealing a new secret, showing you something you missed before in a new light.
So you compared this film to The Shining and then said that we needed to keep watching it so that we could reveal new things. No thanks. The Shining never needed us to keep watching it to reveal new things. If I didn't enjoy it the first time, I'm not going to keep watching it in the hopes that it gets better. If you get a chance, read the whole review because the gushing praise heaped upon this film and its director will have you instantly reaching for a vomit bag. But it's not the only 100% or perfect score review. There are 5 more equally as gushing with their praise.
Us is a true genre flick, polished to a fine degree, a pure distillation of the essence of horror cinema.
No, the essence of horror cinema is not to bore your audience and talk down to them like they're children.
This is an unforgettable dance with the devil.
That's a nope. I'd pretty much forgotten what most of this film was about. A young family on a holiday find their peaceful time at their getaway location is interrupted by a family of stalking home invaders who look exactly like them. These doppelgangers want what they have and will stop at nothing to get it. However, we find out that these aren't the only doppelgangers, and soon enough they all want to rise from their hiding spot and take over the world, or at least the west coast of America. On the surface, it's a bloody great idea. The problem is that around the halfway mark, maybe even earlier, you can work out what the twist of the film is. By the end, it becomes more of a, wow, that was it, rather than a, wow, that was awesome. There's no usual suspects moment in this film, even though Peele really wants there to be. Reading professional reviews of films like this, it's amazing to see the disconnect between those type of people who desperately want to be recognized by the Hollywood elite and the rest of us who are just forced to pay to consume an end product. But at least I know there are others out there who agree with me, like this awesome user review score on IMDb. Total nonsense and absolute garbage. 2 hours of tedious, incomprehensible rubbish. What the film is really about is stupid people such as idiot movie reviewers and certain moviegoers being duped into believing they're viewing some kind of classic, when in fact they're really being shown is a complete make it up as you go along Night of the Dead gobbledygook, laughing all the way to the bank. Not even I could have been that harsh, but my sentiments exactly. Now this one's not quite a critic darling, and even the user scores are just above average, but it's the online horror community that really blew smoke up this movie's ass.
A movie for fans of unabashedly wild horror. The madness lasts almost 2 hours and 20 minutes and will not disappoint fans.
Let me tell you a secret, Mr. Reviewer. 2 hours and 20 minutes was far too long for a movie like this, and I was disappointed. In fact, I didn't even make it to the end of the film. When the final scene approached and the idiots were sitting in the car and talking for what felt like 10 minutes, instead of going to kill or be killed by Art, I tapped out and had had enough. You're at the end of the film, we want carnage, we want action, we don't want to see you sitting in a car talking. Now I get it. This movie was a gore lover's paradise and really played up to the torture porn horror genre, but at one stage, it gets to the point where enough is enough, and the utter violence inflicted on one of the characters says more about the writer, director, and audience who enjoyed it than it should have.
For those who like scares, the memorable antagonist and gore, it delivers on all fronts.
What exactly was scary about this movie? The only thing that scared me was the runtime, because I knew that was 2 hours, I couldn't do something else. The plot revolves around a resurrected clown named Art who wants to kill a girl and her brother on Halloween. Except Art sees this little girl in the laundrette, but she's a hallucination or something, I don't know and I don't care. This was one of the best movies I've ever seen, and I completely recommend to all horror fans because it was a great movie and I wish I had seen this in the theater, but really if you do not like gore, I do not recommend. But if you can handle it, then I highly recommend. Plus the first movie was okay, but this one was better, and the villain in this movie, Art the Clown, is one of the most funniest villains I've seen, but the movie is pretty gory, so just be cautious when watching it. And as I said, I completely recommend this movie to every horror fan and to everyone out there who wants to watch this movie. One of the best movies I've ever seen. Firstly, you need to learn some punctuation. Secondly, if you want a good horror movie set in a laundrette, check out the movie Bulla from the Philippines. I will admit there was some creativity here, such as a scene on a TV set where everything starts to go a little insane, but there was just not enough of that. And gladly, I'm not the only one who agrees. It looks like one big amateur film, like a bunch of kids decided to film a slasher movie, but all they could find to use were CPR dummies, some cheap fake blood, and plastic toy saws. Brutal, but I couldn't have said it better myself. In the end, this movie was pure shite. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I don't know what this film is. How can I love it? Well, that just means you're not part of a very obsessive online J-horror community that thinks this film and the next one on this list are the greatest horror movies ever made. Ever. Did I mention ever? Greatest movies ever. Hyperbole aside, the love this movie gets online is truly mind-blowing. You'd think it was a life-changing experience if you've ever heard any obsessive fan of the film talk about it. Well, they don't just talk about it. They kind of force their opinion down your throat and make you swallow it without taking a drink of water. Take this banger off Reddit, for example.
Hello everyone, I just started with all movies you've been recommended and my first one was Noroi the Curse. This might be funny for people who have watched many J-horror movies, but it really freaks the shit out of me. I've been watched some T-horror movies about curses and they were all scary, but this one hits different. It was honestly a masterpiece, though I don't know why. Some people in comments really found it boring. To be honest, the movie was playing on my nerves the whole time I was watching. Thanks for all people who recommended this. I got a bad grammar, lol.
You don't just got a bad grammar, my friend. You got a bad taste in movies too. Now, I admit I was probably one of the people in the comments section who wrote that it was a boring film. But come on, this movie does not have an ending. Yes, that's right. The movie does not have an ending. It just ends. The reason? Well, it's supposed to be a documentary-style found footage film, and thus the plot indicates that the director of said commentary ends up dead, belated spoiler alert, before working out the mysteries of what he's investigating. And what he is investigating is something called the Kagutaba, an ancient demon who seems to connect a series of seemingly unrelated paranormal events. The director then starts to notice that there are some odd things that are happening around him, and he links them to the Kagutaba.
The mystery at the film's core is intriguing to watch unfold. At 115 minutes, the film is never boring and doesn't feel too long. Big compliment, as handheld horror typically works better when it's short and to the point.
Oh my god, what movie did you watch? I want to watch that film. One of the things that really annoys me about the English title of the film is that if you translated the Japanese part into English, it would be called Curse the Curse. Another thing that fans of the movie will tell you is that it's timeless, a classic that'll always be relevant. Well, what did you think? Drifter B? Didn't age well, quite a snooze fest. That's a review from 2024, so if you're sitting there thinking you might want to watch this just because you agree with the positive reviews, you might need to reconsider your pending decision. Now, talking about fan bases that force their opinions down your throat, if you thought the Noroi community was obsessive, let me introduce you to the Pulse community. These are all from the cesspool that is Reddit. Take it away.
Kairo is a masterpiece. I watched it alone when it came out on DVD. Felt like my brain was bleeding from pure horror and trauma. Love it. I watched Pulse a few years ago and it remains the only horror film to scare me. I've watched around 300 horror films and I've yet to find one as scary as Pulse. The pure dread and terror that surrounds this film is unlike anything I've ever seen before.
Or this masterpiece, which is actually a reply to a comment directed at me.
I wish I could understand the brain that doesn't find Pulse to be an unsettling experience. I can understand thinking like the pacing is bad, the dialogue is bad, but not that it's not frightening.
Specifically, everyone who is unnaturally obsessed with this film will always cite the following scene as the scariest scene in horror cinema. Now, I need to warn you beforehand on the horror that you're about to witness. Let's go. Yes, you just watched the scariest scene in horror cinema. A person walking in slow motion who hilariously trips over a high heel. It looks more like a blooper than something that should be in the final cut of the film. I'm going to say what a lot of people don't dare to say out loud. Sometimes Japanese films can be bloody boring. And this is one of those titles. It's full of typically stoic characters who show very little emotion, and then ramp it up to 11 when they do show some. The movie has many scenes of awkward pause, which is supposed to allow you to soak in the horror. It allowed me time to flick through Reddit to find some more choice comments.
Probably the greatest film of the century, something that is undescribable. The whole atmosphere of loneliness spreading through the city, the perception of being alone is the scariest feeling. Kurosawa never loses control of the film. He's much more interested in people than in ghosts. The way this film is paced is one of Kurosawa's greatest achievements.
What an endorsement. How could you not want to watch it? Oh, that's right, unless you value your time and don't find ghosts tripping over high heels scary. Did I mention the movie was almost 2 hours long? Part of that 2 hours involves watching a guy installing Internet Explorer on his 90s PC, where in the background, you can see a PlayStation controller and wish he'd picked that up and loaded up any game that he owned instead. Thankfully, I'm not the only one who hates this film. I trusted those glowing critic reviews. 2 hours I'll never get back. Bizarrely overrated, probably just because there's a bad Hollywood remake. The original Pulse is weird, confusing, cheesy, and unbelievably boring. The acting and dialogue are awful, and only one scene is even mildly creepy. On paper, I really should have liked this film. A horror without jump scares. I am flabbergasted by how well received it is. This is not the thinking man's horror that everyone makes it out to be. It's endlessly boring, full of filler, has a cheesy and goofy soundtrack, poorly acted and edited, and has a ham-fisted message crammed into the final act. Finally, this doesn't really make the movie any worse than it already is, but no aspect of it is scary. Not wanting to use jump scares is a good thing, but nothing in the movie has any impact. Just feels flat. Or as I like to say, it's just a bit shit. No, it's a lot shit. This final title I'm not going to dwell too much on, but in my opinion, it is a great example of making a movie where squeezing in social commentary and issues of the day messaging was far more important than making a good film. 2021's Candyman will probably be remembered more for race-changing the main character than any sense of horror. Out goes a scared white girl, in comes an interracial queer couple. For what purpose? This Candyman title, marketed as a direct sequel to the 1992 original, was lauded for its social commentary, from police brutality to gentrification. We were all supposed to gush over these themes and ignore the fact there wasn't really a movie here. Now, of course, there are people who loved it, and I am deliberately using those quotation marks.
Nia DaCosta's slow burn sequel makes Candyman feel vital, both building on and course correcting the movies in the series that came before it. This is horror with grandeur, a movie that pays homage to history and feels so of the moment as to seem fresh out of the lab. Candyman, the glossiest horror movie in ages, isn't just horror. It's horror that reaches for the Latin in that MGM logo we see in the opening credits. Ars gratia artis, art for art's sake.
Oh wait, the praise gets worse.
Nia DaCosta does a fabulous job at modernizing Candyman. The gore, violence sequences, and general atmosphere are almost suffocating.
Suffocating, huh? The only thing suffocating is me reading all this bullshit. Like this.
What so easily could have been a bland sequel that is simply trying to make a quick buck on an established character is instead a motivated and inspired final product that is truly one of the best films of the year.
Slow down, champ. It's just the movie. I can admit there are times when the movie does feel creepy, but that's got more to do with the Hollywood machine of being able to make glitzy, creepy moments rather than anything really genuine. I can find creepy moments in a movie like Night Swim, and that was complete and utter horseshit. But thankfully, I'm not the only one who feels this way about the film. A BuzzFeed review of all sites says this about it. Viewers of the new Candyman movie get overblown discourse instead of genuine horror. I thought that was the whole point of the film. Discourse first, horror second, or third, or maybe somewhere way down the list. So that's it. That's my pile of movies that I hated that you might have loved. And I'm sorry that if you did love them. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not sorry. We all have different tastes and different opinions, and most of the time, mine are wrong. But what did you think of them? Are there any movies that you hated that other people loved? I would love to read in the comments section below. Otherwise, I've been the Artie Dance. You are watching Shockmania. If you'd like, subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time.